God's on the radio. You got Buddha on the audio. Scott Bale on the telephone. Dan Rather at Presidio and put all the knowledge in the same game. Mark on the stereo. You got rum in your Cheerio. Lift up from the get-go. Grabbing on the spoon is the most important meal of the day.
You gotta turn it up. You gotta.
Each moment's just a reflex. Response is just emotion. The pressure never ends, baby. I hope it don't drive me crazy. I don't wanna be a poor boy. It don't help to say, gimme, 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 gimme. I ain't fooling myself now. All I know is what
Hey, folks, and welcome. Bang your head. It's time for Grab a Stack of Rock with tonight Mike and D'Arcy Briggs as we talk to Tim Durling. He's going on record tonight about this band, April Wine. How are you doing tonight, Tim and D'Arcy?
I'm doing great, D'Arcy. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing great. It's great to get one of these, coast to coast calls going on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. We're basically spanning the country, and Mike's sort of the steady anchor.
Middle-ish.
The glue that holds it all together.
Yeah.
And this is D'Arcy's first time on the live show, so we're going to do it fast and furious. We're going to take comments. Do not be afraid to just speak up if you have something you want to say. I have some scripted questions, and I'm sure you might have some as well.
Yep.
Tim, are you ready to rock?
Look, a little bit of future tense. I'm just, pumped.
All right.
What a killer song that is.
It is. I kind of felt like keeping on rocking, but we had to get on with the show. We had to talk about this band. I'm going to lead off with my first question. And D'Arcy and I both contributed to this book. We are both proud to say 29 contributors this time, Tim. You have spoken in the past about herding cats. I'm just wondering, how did you decide to take on 29 contributors? And then at that point, how did you decide who you were going to approach, or vice versa?
Well, did I freeze? No, okay.
No, we're good. We're good.
You were a little choppy there for a second. Wow. I needed people that knew about April Wine enough to talk about them, and until I kept looking, and once I knew that I had, I think there was one album. You could probably guess which one, or maybe you can't. There was one album that I had a little bit of a problem finding a good amount of contributors, but once I found 5, I said, okay, well, that's decent. So I wanted at least 5. I didn't approach it like the way that I did the Night Ranger book. I wanted 10 panelists per chapter, but April Wine had more albums. So I thought, I won't put a number on it. I'll just, I'll kind of like feel it out when I think there's enough content. And basically it's, of course, it's not quantity, it's quality, right? Did I answer your question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
It
just
like,
as far as determining who to do it, I mean, there are certain people like both of you that have been in my books before. So I always start with, people that I know have been in my books before, but then I have to find out, well, do you actually like the band that I'm doing this current book on? And not everybody did, and that's fine. And then somebody said, well, I know this album and that album. I said, you're free to talk about those albums. Gordon taught me how to herd cats. Yeah, I've got the cat shut out tonight, so it should be a cat-free show, but they do provide some fun. Yeah, that, I'm pretty sure I've got some people in this book that haven't had in any of my books before, which is awesome. I love expanding that and reaching out. Yeah, I definitely got some people in here I've never had in books before. So I can't just answer
Yeah.
a straight question, Mike. I gotta.
I think you did. Ah,
Terrestrial DJs.
We got
as a show host, I am quite satisfied with your answer, and I shall not press it further. And I shall hand it over to D'Arcy Briggs from the D'Arcy Scott YouTube channel.
Yeah. So we've talked about, who you picked for the book. So I'm just curious, why April Wine? And obviously they're a band you like, and you've done other interviews on the book and we've seen that. And obviously they're from your neck of the woods. And so I'm wondering, not, is it preferential treatment, but is it something in that sound that it sounds like home to you in a way, especially given, the kind of range of sounds and eras that April Wine would go through, but is there something sort of familiar to them that kind of drew you to get that coverage?
That's a great question. Not really. I'm not going to say preferential treatment, more like reverential treatment, because they're the only classic rock band that came from this part of Canada that made a mark on the world stage. It's quite something. And thank goodness I'm a fan. It would kind of suck if I wasn't, because it's like, somebody that's in a position to do something like this and doesn't like the band. But I've been a fan for a long, long time. It is very cool that they're from my neck of the woods. It's extremely cool that Miles Goodwin and I have the same birthplace. Not the same hometown, but the same birthplace, Woodstock, New Brunswick. So, but even, Nova Scotia is just the next province over. And it's really cool to think that there's a band that not only conquered Canada, I would say, but they, I think they peaked very soon in the States and then it dropped off, but they still had a gold and a platinum record. And that's hard to do for Canadian acts. It always has been. And I think it always will be, to break and stay there and to make any kind of mark. So they did it, can't take that away from them. And they're just a great rock and roll band with, you're right, a pretty wide variety. And I think, again, a band I like and a band that hasn't had a bunch of books about them. And I think people should know that they have 16 studio albums and there's a lot of music to talk about, more than I think most people think. If they do know April Wine, they might think that they have 4, 5, 6 albums at the most, but no, 16.
Exactly. And to that point, I was talking about doing this recording with this live show with my partner right before jumping on. And she was like, "Oh, do I know April Wine? I might know some of their hits." So I just ran through their greatest hits and it was, "Oh, I know that song. Yep. Oh, I know that." Just again and again. And it was, I think, every track I played. Yep, I remember this. I know this. Yep. So it's just one of those bands you might not realize how much of it you actually do know.
Yeah, especially the 70s stuff. I know that, like, my wife and I have talked about this, because if we had a 70s playlist going, like we were doing it like a DIY around the house or something like that, she'd say, "Who's this?" I'd say, "It's April Wine." And for a while she would say, "I never know when it's them." Because you could have been a lady, doesn't sound anything like Weeping Widow, doesn't sound anything like Tonight is a Wonderful Time to Fall in Love, doesn't sound anything like Roller, doesn't, it's quite varied. It's pretty amazing stuff. And I just like spreading the word about these bands. Like, I'm always about, the top bands, the ones that have had tons of books written on them, tons of great books written about them. I'm the person that goes, "Yeah, they're great. They're fantastic. What about April Wine? Let's get them in the mix. Let's get these lesser known bands into the mix." So I was going to get to them eventually, and it's a really cool coincidence that not only it's the first Canadian book or Canadian band I've done a book about, but they're from my area. Because I think I could be wrong about this, guys, but most artists of any genre that made it out of Canada, they're usually from Toronto or Montreal or Vancouver, right? I know there's exceptions. I mean, I know the Guess Who were out of Winnipeg and Sarah McLachlan was out of Halifax, but most people consider her out of Vancouver. But you know what I'm saying? It's like not a lot of stuff from the East Coast makes it on a world, scale.
So further to that point, I was actually something I was going to mention. A lot of people just kind of assume in Canada, if a band comes out and they're big, they're probably from Ontario. There are the exceptions like the Guess Who, but they kind of made it clear they were from a prairie town in some of their songs. With April Wine, I had no idea they were from the East Coast, and I imagine that you probably run into people who also are unaware of that fact.
Well, that and the fact that, I mean, as of 1970, they relocated to Montreal. So Montreal kind of adopted them as a band, so they can lay claim to that too. And certainly their famous years where they were based out of Montreal. But they started in, Halifax or Waverly on the outskirts. So.
I also wanted to riff off of something D'Arcy said. When you said that your partner doesn't necessarily know she's listening to April Wine when they hit the radio. And I had a question here well, not a question really, more of an observation. But one of the great appealing factors to me about April Wine is the multiple lead singers. Mm-hmm. And to that point, when I first heard Ooh, What a Night on the radio, I had no idea I was listening to April Wine. I was like, who is the singer? Like, he's got kind of a rasp to him, like early Steven Tyler. There you go. And, I had no idea. That's
but how would you, right? If all you saw or knew of them was that the singer's name was Miles Goodwin, and what he sounded like on certain songs, you wouldn't necessarily think that way. I mean, I tell this story, and it is absolutely true because I was a latecomer getting into Kiss. It wasn't until the early 90s I got into Kiss, but I thought Paul Stanley sang everything.
Yeah,
because
me too.
All the videos I saw were his songs. And he's the front man. So, and then I thought, oh, okay, well, he and Gene sang back and forth and Ace and Peter a little bit, but when they didn't have any makeup, Paul sang everything. And then I found out I was wrong about that too. So you learn these things. But yeah, they're one of those bands, and it's cool when you have another singer take the mic once in a while.
To me, that's a strength, but I'm wondering if to you, or not to you, but to April Wine, if that was a detriment.
I don't think so.
No.
What a Night's one of their all-time classics. Just as soon even as I can attest to this, even as recently as April of this year, when I saw them opening for Triumph, they started their set off with What a Night, and before the lights even came on, ding, 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 and people knew every song that they did. It was just hit after hit after hit after hit.
There you go.
Yeah, it's a different story in the US for sure. It's a different story. It's basically about the Capitol years, like turn of the 80s.
D'Arcy, do you want to take the next one?
Of course. So my next question is, you've just put out this book. You were wrapping up some work on your beginner's guide to Fleetwood Mac. And I'm wondering, with each publication, each release, kind of what are you learning about streamlining the process? What are some headaches that you feel, might always be there? And what are some things you think you're getting better at as you kind of publish more and more?
Good question. Yeah. And as always, I have to shout out my buddy, Matt Phillips, because they wouldn't exist without him. So between the two of us, we've got it down pretty good. Like and so actually it's a three-way partnership. So it's me and Matt, and it's our buddy Bug Campbell, because Bug does the proofreading, and that's so important. That is so important. We've all read books that were not proofread, and it's hard. It's a hard slog to read through the mistakes. But we've got a pretty good system down, and there's waiting that needs to necessarily happen, but I don't know. I think we're starting to figure this out after 7 books. So yeah, they're knock on wood, there really haven't been anything that have a spanner in the works, as they say, that have gummed up the process. Knock on wood. So this one came together, once, it takes a while when I do a panel book, it takes a while to get all of the content, to get everybody to send in the content. Once that's in and I edit it together to make it conversational, and then I send it off to Bug for proofreading, it's pretty quick once that happens. And in a case like the Fleetwood Mac book and also my Sammy Hagar book, I wrote those myself. So those are even quicker. And I'm getting, and my next book that's coming out after this one is one like that I wrote myself. That's in the design stage now. and that came together quite quickly. So I'm not saying it's easy, because if it was easy, it wouldn't be worth doing. But um, I'm not hindered by any technical restraints. Let's put it that way. I'm like, the only restraints, it's like, how fast can I get it in gear and, send the emails out to people and get the names for people that want to take part and all of that.
So you mentioned Matt Phillips. Why don't we take a look at his artwork this time?
Yeah.
Very nice front cover, but I think the spine is the star of the show this time.
Well,
Like
yes.
yeah.
Yeah. Dan, our good buddy, Dan Chartrand from, I love it. You got one handy. That's exactly it. Dan noticed it too when I was talking to him, because he had a power play cassette that looked like that. And that's something I had to sell Matt on, because he's like, why do you want the spine to look completely different than the front and the back? I said, and I showed him, I said, trust me, it won't sell books, I don't think, and it won't deter anyone from buying. But for those that are buying it, and those that collect cassettes, especially in Canada, sooner or later, they're going to look at that and go, why does that look familiar? And one of the great ironies, of course, is that the only one of those cassettes that I cannot find that looks like that is on record.
That's an interesting story.
Yeah.
All right. Well, back over to you, D'Arcy.
All right. Now, I think obviously you are massively familiar with April Wine. And I would assume, in doing this, you're probably not going to learn much new about the band, but were there sort of opinions on records you thought were, your own opinion and the popular opinion, and did, not your own view, but were you sort of interested in how albums got different types of feedback than what you were expecting?
Absolutely. That's a favorite thing of mine about doing these and then seeing the results of them. Or, it's one thing to ask a bunch of questions and send out a bunch of stuff and say, can you talk about this? But then when people come back and I go, wow, they're hearing this totally differently than I am. Like, two good examples. Yeah, obviously, every time I do a book, I listen to the entire catalog, and I listen to the albums that I never listened to, that I don't pick up that much. And the two albums that I listened to, probably more in the past year than I'd listened to since I bought the CDs in the mid 90s were their debut album and Forever for Now. And those are still two albums that I myself am not crazy about. The first album is very different sounding. It's very folky. Miles only sings a couple of songs, like the Henmans sing. It's him and the Henmans on that one. It's a very different sounding album. That's all over the place. They haven't figured out what kind of band they want to be. You can tell it's very much a young band, first time in the studio. That's not to say it's not without its charms. And then Forever for Now was originally intended on being a Miles Goodwin solo album, but at the 11th hour, the decision was made to put April Wine on it. But it doesn't sound like April Wine. It's very diverse. And I found those albums to be, for the most part, a hard listen for my personal taste. But in the process of doing this book, I found people that really like those albums. And that was eye-opening to me, because I really, and honest to God, I thought most of us fans bought those albums just so we had them all. It was like a sense of obligation, but we never listened to them. But hey, it's cool. It's cool that somebody likes them.
I had sort of a similar experience with, this is a controversial take and off topic, but I had kind of a similar experience with Judas Priest, where I thought Rock-a-Rolla sounded completely different from the band that I fell in love with. And I found it too bluesy and slow and sluggish. And then I found out, holy crap, there's a lot of people who really revere that album. So, it's all about different people, different tastes.
And the things that you don't like about an album could be the same things that somebody likes about an album. So it just depends on it depends on your overall musical taste, right? I like guitar-oriented rock, and, I'm fine with some acoustic and some piano balladry. And Miles was a master at writing, beautiful piano ballads. But that first album is so out of character. People talk about, Judas Priest is a good example. Rush is a really good example. The first Aerosmith to a certain extent, because Tyler sounds so different on there. Debut albums, not all debut albums can come like Boston and just be fully formed, or Van Halen. Sometimes it takes a while, and it's interesting hearing those growing pains. And I'm sure that for people who were introduced to April Wine with first glance, when when they heard Roller on the radio, are probably absolutely even more shocked to hear this earlier material, because they had no context for how different it was. In Canada, we got a gradual change from album to album, but in the States it was like, oh, let's get those older albums. What like, so it's just part of the musical experience. Some bands hit it out of the park right away, but a lot don't.
That first album doesn't even look like an April Wine album, does it?
That is one of the worst album covers, I think. Yeah, I'm surprised, and I think maybe the only reason it doesn't make those those internet lists of worst album covers ever is that it was only released in Canada, and it just doesn't have, it's not as widely known enough. But like, I like, who thought that putting a pair of feet on an album cover like that is going to make people go into a record store and go, that I got to have that record right there.
Somebody commented in the book that it might be something to do with crushing grapes. That's the as you
only,
can see, he's in the desert or something, There's no grapes,
or like dry rock or something,
Yeah.
It is kind of a dry rock sounding album now that I think about it. But that's the only guess that makes any sense, is crushing grapes with your feet to make wine. Other than that, it's just it's a really bad cover.
Yeah.
Like it's bad. It's bad right up there with some of the Fleetwood Mac album covers. I mean, those could be Mick Fleetwood's feet. Wouldn't surprise me. And he's naked, by the way, just for the moment. You have to know the old Fleetwood Mac album covers to truly appreciate that, but they have some horrific ones.
Max the Axe is in the house tonight.
Seems like he's a rock-a-rolla fan, Mike.
I think he might be a rock-a-rolla fan, or he might just be he might also be an April Wine fan. I know that he was checking out that animation earlier. Max, by the way, get well. He busted his foot on the golf course, and it's about the size of a football right now. So get well, Max.
Not a good time to take an album cover photo.
No.
Sorry.
For April Wine, anyway.
Anyway.
D'Arcy, do you want to take it from there while I get my
please
back?
We'd love to. Please, let's move on.
Yeah.
Well, this next question is about album covers, so great. Obviously, the books cover mostly the studio albums, but when you look at the April Wine catalog, they have plenty of compilations, lots of greatest hits, lots of live, but even the best of the rock ballads.
Yeah,
you've got that one. You have the first decade. Again, these highly specialized compilations. So I'm wondering. Obviously not for this book, but in the future, are you looking at how much coverage do you want to give compilations versus just studio albums, things like that?
Honestly, not a lot, because I think that most classic bands, there comes a point where their catalog becomes top heavy with comps and live albums. I talk about the compilations where there are new songs on them, and I talk about those in the chapters that are closest to a studio album. I do have a section at the somewhere in here. You'd think I'd know my own book, but page 200. There's a section that's got probably not all the worldwide ones, but most of the major compilations. And also, that's a band where, when I start thinking about their compilations, I get kind of annoyed, because they have songs that are B-sides that weren't on any album, like studio songs, totally different songs. There are alternate mixes of songs. There are live versions of songs that were released as B-sides and 45s and things like that have never ever made it to a compilation. Not only have they never made it to a CD, they've never even made it to a cassette. And with all these compilations that come out, they never go back. Like, I don't know who's in charge of the masters, but they're not doing a good job. And that's something I've said pretty consistently. Most classic rock bands get the treatment they deserve with curating the back catalog. April Wine deserves that, and they're not getting it, and it's a shame.
So that actually ties into my last question that I was going to ask, but we may as well do this since it segues perfectly. I was going to ask you if the band did a quote unquote perfect 2 CD compilation or a box set today, what would it take to, what would have to be on it? So we have unreleased on
So
CD
there are
mixes, live tracks,
Yeah.
B-sides.
There's at least a CD's worth of the B-sides and then the alternate versions, whether they're live or whether they're different mixes. So if you wanted to do a 2-disc best of, there would be all kinds of room to have all of the singles and these oddities. Some of the oddities are singles too. Like April Wine have, I know they have at least 5 songs that if you want to hear them, if somebody hasn't ripped them to YouTube, you've got to go and find a used 45. You know, they've got 3 that came out in the early days, and then, well, no, 4 that came out in the 70s and 1 that came out in 84. And I just don't understand why, because eventually if an album gets reissued on CD and there was a B-side from one of the singles from that album, the reissue contains that song. It's kind of a given, not in the case of April Wine. And that's rare. That's rare because it usually does get reissued after a while, but I don't know what the problem is.
I'm kind of curious if you're missing any from your own personal collection, what you're missing.
I actually don't have the song Goody Two Shoes. I think that's the B-side of Like a Lover, Like a Song. That's a 45 I need to track down. I've got all the other ones. There's one called Teacher, which is the B-side of You Could Have Been a Lady. There's one called I Get Bad, which is the B-side of, I want to say, it's either Lady Run, Lady Hide, or Weeping Widow. And the other one is called Tell Your Mama. So there's those ones. And then there's the Goody Two Shoes, which is from the Whole World's Going Crazy era. My favorite is a song called I Really Don't Want Your Love, which was the B-side of This Could Be the Right One from Animal Grace. It's a killer song. Would have fit right in on that album. As a matter of fact, there's a couple songs on that album that aren't as good as that song. No, not even close. And they could have easily put it on there. It would have been a 10-song album. As it stands, it's a 9-song album. I found that single at a flea market in 1998. And I remember I picked it up because I was like, oh, that's cool. I don't have that. And then I looked at the B-side. I was like, oh, new April Wine to listen to, because there were no new albums coming out at that point. And I listened to it on like an old record player, and it didn't sound great, but I could tell it was a good song. And like, I just wish I had a better version of this to listen to.
Damn. All right. Well, D'Arcy, it's over to you. Oh, hello, Robert. How are you?
Yeah, I Robert. I think he's hit it right on the head. Unidisc is the company that handles the Aquarius back catalog, and they put all of the April Wine albums out on Digipacks, which I have mixed feelings about Digipacks. What Unidisc did that I like is that for the first time ever, the 3 April Wine live albums that came out during that Aquarius run finally existed on CD. Yeah. And One for the Road actually has a couple of extra live songs on it. And the Live at the Alma combo combines the US and the Canadian track listings. So that's good. But why didn't Animal Grace contain the song I just talked about? Why didn't, you know what I mean? So it's like they went so far, but they didn't go any further.
All right.
And they could have just done it when they did that series, right? And been done with it. But
all right, D'Arcy, back to you.
Yeah, while we're talking about physical formats, it's an interesting question when you think about a band that spans the decades and kind of crosses all the different media thresholds. But does April Wine strike you as, a cassette band, a vinyl band, a CD band? Obviously, they're available on all those formats. And as the internet knows, you're kind of like well known for, 8 tracks.
Oh, they're definitely an 8-track band.
They're an 8-track band for you?
Yeah. When I first started collecting, I used to see On Record and Stand Back a lot, like 8-track. And I see those are probably the vinyl records I see the most too. So obviously those sold a lot of albums in the 70s and got into a lot of homes. I'm going to say 8-track or vinyl. To a certain extent, cassette, yes. I wouldn't call them a CD band, which is a shame. They never had that comeback or that resurgence where younger people get into them. I mean, there would be little things that would happen, like, you know, when that movie Joe Dirt came out with David Spade, right? Rollers on that, which is kind of cool. You didn't hear that. You didn't hear a lot of April Wine out there in popular culture, but there needs to be more of that. There needs to be like a Stranger Things type of thing happen with an April Wine song, you know?
I'm sure CBC will get right on that.
Yeah.
Well, this leads into something else I was going to ask you is, what do you think Trailer Park Boys did for April Wine? Because, to be honest with you, I never heard of some. Well, I didn't necessarily know some of those songs were April Wine until Ricky said, "Play I Like to Rock."
That's April Wine. Yeah. Look at that Diane Sawyer song.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's totally, you know, absolutely. Did they see a bump in album sales? I don't think so. You know, but it's cool. No question, it's cool. And it's great when people that are in positions to do things like that put their money where their mouth is and not just say, "Oh yeah, I like that band." It's like, not only do I like that band, but I'm going to go to the mat for them. I'm going to talk about them. I'm going to write them in. Right. You know, even if it's just a passing thing. I'm pretty sure that the one of the Trailer Park Boys movies, the soundtrack has "I'm on Fire for You, Baby" on it.
I think so. And also I'm pretty sure Ricky at one point in one of the early episodes is listening to an April Wine ballad in the car. I don't know if it's just between you and me or not. I can't remember. I haven't seen it so long, but I was like, "Oh yeah, that's a nice song," you know, and it was a really, you know, cool usage of the song. But
so, yeah, there just needs to be more of that. That's all.
I agree. Now, speaking of Trailer Park Boys, I would like to take a 2-minute break here and hand it over to my good pal, Archie Gamble, who helped get another band on Trailer Park Boys, band called Helix. Now, I asked Archie Gamble for just a little something on Jerry Mercer, the April Wine drummer. So here is Archie Gamble from Helix on Jerry Mercer, and we will be back. Well, you guys will be, D'Arcy, you'll be visible because it's a vertical video. I'm going to turn off my camera. Here's Archie.
So Michael has asked me to put together some thoughts about Jerry Mercer, the incredible drummer from the incredible Canadian band April Wine. Yeah, how do you describe Jerry? I mean, one of the very first concerts I ever saw was April Wine in Kitchen Memorial Auditorium. And I was probably 9 or 10 years old. And it was one of the first live drum solos I've ever seen. And back then, Jerry was notorious for his drum solo. In particular, the part where he would do these single-stroke rolls. But he would raise his hands in slow motion up and off the drum while one hand was playing, you know, fast eighth notes. The other hand was in the air, slowly coming down like the Bionic Man. And he was notorious for this solo. He was a fantastic drummer with great technique. And I know drummers like Neil Peart from Rush looked up to him and admired his style. Of course, he had the big, huge, mega-sized white drum kit, you know. And then later on, he went on to, I think it was Milestones. And then he went on to be involved with the company, the Fiberglass Shell Drums. And he had a really unique sound, and he was a great player. And I mean, you know, as far as songs, you want to know some key things to look at to encapsulate his combination of great technique and great feel would be like Sign of the Gypsy Queen's a great drum track. I Like to Rock, multiple time signatures and stuff on that one. Great display of chops, you know. Oh, What a Night, another same thing. Time signature changes and great chops and feel. And yeah, just a fantastic drummer all around. And he toured until he was in his 70s, so kudos to Jerry.
Kudos to Jerry, indeed. Any thoughts on what he just sent him?
Oh, yeah. Archie's dead on about that drum solo. He would do that. I saw April Wine with Jerry 5 times, and he would just... You couldn't... And if you were just listening, you couldn't tell when he switched hands, and he would get faster and faster and faster. That was part of his drum solo. Yeah, and he's a big dude, like he just towered over the kid, and he hit so hard that he would make the poppiest April Wine songs rock. That's one thing I always liked about Jerry. He was a lifer, man. Jerry was born in 1939, so when he joined April Wine, he was 34 or 33. He was previously in a band called Mash McCann, who had a hit called As the Years Go By. That was a minor hit. So he'd been in the music business for a long, long, long time. So, he was a veteran long before like April Wine broke big in the late 70s. But it was always a highlight of the show. And he was he was entertaining. Sometimes, I don't know if he always did this, but not only would he do that drum solo, but he'd also do a thing where he'd like keep a beat with the bass pedal. And he'd have like a whistle. And it's like, it was
like a marching band kind of deal.
Yeah. And Archie's right. I mean, that's something about Miles Goodwin's songwriting, or in some cases Jim Clench's songwriting. Some of those songs sound simple, but they're not. Like Ooh, What a Night is really tricky as far as timing. So is I Like to Rock. So is Enough is Enough, which is a straight up pop rock song, one of my favorites. But it's not straight 4/4. It's tricky. You got to be on it to play it right. So, they're deceptively, they make it sound easy, but it's not a lot of the time.
So that also ties into a question that I had, or a point really, but 21st Century Schizoid Man. First of all, it's my favorite version of that song, I think. But I think that's got to be their most ambitious cover.
Oh yeah,
they've attempted. Yeah.
It's my history with that is I didn't like it when I first heard it. I first heard it on the All the Rockers compilation, but I didn't have any context for it. I'm like, what is this weird song? Why are the vocals all distorted like that? What is this? And then I found out more about it. Oh, okay, it's a King Crimson cover. All I knew about King Crimson was they were a prog band, and I knew that album cover, that Court of the Crimson King. That's a very striking album cover. So I didn't care much for that song until the first time I saw April Wine live in 1994, and they did Schizoid Man, and I realized what a tight band they were, because all of those parts in the midsection where it stops and starts really quickly, they were dead on it. You could hear a pin drop in between. There was no feedback. There was no dragging of a snare. They were so tight. And Jerry did his drum solo in the middle of that song.
Wow.
So, they and then, and then he does a solo, and then all of a sudden, like a couple of hits on the ride, and it's back to like, and I'm like, okay, now I get it. I like this song.
D'Arcy, you're a prog guy. What do you think about that one?
The only bands that do prog covers are other prog bands. So for a rock band like April Wine to take that on so successfully, I obviously prefer the King Crimson one as a prog guy. But that said, the fact that they can do it and do it so well, I think speaks volumes to the musicianship in that band. And just like Tim was saying, that tracks like Enough is Enough might sound simple, but then when you give it time, kind of listen beneath the surface, you get to hear how much depth as a band April Wine really has.
Yeah, if you're trying to, if you're in a band, you want to try and learn it. Oh, that'll be easy. And then all of a sudden the drums keep going when they're supposed to stop and then come back in. Like, it's like not that easy. They do that a lot. Say Hello. There's another good example. That's a very, very complicated song for a 3-chord rock song. The bass line in that song, the late Steve Lang, it's like he plays hide and seek with where he's going to play his notes. It's not virtuoso playing, but it's to get it right. He'll drop out and then he'll come in when you don't expect it. They have a lot of cool little songs like that. And in some of their best known songs, they're really showing those chops off. I don't know why they felt the need to go all in and cover such a complicated song like Schizoid Man. But I do know that the engineer on that album, the late Nick Blagona, also worked on the King Crimson version. So he kind of had an understanding of how to record it. And April Wine, you can never call them a prog band, but they obviously proved that they can do it. So they have the prog chops, which, and I know that I've heard a live recording of them from, I think they were playing in the UK on the Harder Faster tour, opening for Foreigner. And Foreigner at the time had Ian MacDonald, who was in King Crimson. So that was kind of cool. And Miles mentioned that from the stage. Yeah, just, that, I guess it's like, well, need anyone question their musical abilities? Not just anybody can pull that up and do it live. And I've seen them do it at least a couple of times live, because they'd go into it and it's almost like, oh boy, like, once you go in, there's no autopilot moments in that song. You've got to be paying attention the whole time.
You want to keep going, D'Arcy?
Yeah, I think given sort of the legacy of April Wine, which I think the book speaks incredibly well to, but especially with Miles now gone, I've seen a conversation recently on YouTube of, when should a band hang it up? When is enough enough? But April Wine as a band, they've always had rotating members in and out. So I'm curious to hear your opinion of how much of the band, has to stay with Miles, and how much of it can continue sort of as a legacy, or producing new music, only playing, the old stuff. I'd love to hear your opinion on that.
Well, this is a wonderful example, because this doesn't always happen, but my opinion changed in the writing of this book. Because Miles Goodwin wasn't just the lead singer. He was the main songwriter. He was one of the lead guitar players. He was the leader of the band. In many ways, he was the sound of April Wine. He set the pace. He produced, a lot of the albums were either produced by him or co-produced. So, anything with the April Wine name on it, it had to run by him. He was the CEO of April Wine. And after he passed away, I was kind of surprised that they decided to keep going with another singer, a guy named Mark Parent, another singer and guitar player. And I am not a person that would ever go on the internet and spout off about, oh, if such and such isn't there, it's not, because we're all sick of that. And who cares what those people think? I don't, But to myself, I was thinking, I don't know how excited I am about going to see an April Wine without Miles Goodwin, because I've seen them more than any other band. Mike said Max said he saw them 6 times. I've seen them 6 times. They're the band I've seen them more times than anybody else. And that 6th time occurred earlier this year because they were opening for the Triumph reunion tour. Now, Triumph is a band that I've been a fan of way longer than I've been into April Wine. There was no way, when I found out they were coming to Moncton, which is in my neck of the woods, like, drivable, that I wasn't going to go. So it turns out April Wine was the opening act for that. And I thought, okay, that's okay. And I was very and I was already working on this book, which is the crazy thing. I was working on the April Wine book, and I'd pretty much had it all written, including an epilogue. And my epilogue was very polite. Oh, this is what they're doing now. I did not put my 2 cents in about it. And I saw the Brian Greenway led version of April Wine absolutely kill it to an audience waiting for Triumph. As a matter of fact, I am not exaggerating when I say the audience sang along louder to April Wine. And I think some of that, there's a few reasons for that. I think one of the reasons is that April Wine are obviously a more commercially oriented band. They had more radio hits than Triumph did. Even in Canada, if you hear Triumph on the radio, it's probably Lay It on the Line or Magic Power or Hold On or maybe Follow Your Heart. That's about it. April Wine had like a dozen or so, radio staples. So I think that has a lot to do with it too. But I sat there and I enjoyed the hell out of that opening show. They did not try and go down the Foreigner or Journey route and get a sound-alike. They got a guy that could sing the songs very well and play the guitar parts the way they're supposed to be played. And I was convinced, and that's why I rewrote the epilogue and I quoted an old song title of theirs, You Opened Up My Eyes. The future of this band is in good hands with Brian Greenway kind of leading the charge. There are no original members, but he's the senior member. People love those songs. And who is one person on the internet or one crotchety old man in the audience grumbling about who's not there? when so many other people are singing their hearts out and enjoying it and remembering how much they love those songs. And I think a lot of times putting together for the first time, as you guys have both said, I didn't know those were all April Wine songs. I knew every one of those songs. I didn't know the same band did them. So I think this tour did a lot of good things for them. For one thing, it got them out in front of big buildings again, especially in the US, throughout the US, where they hadn't been able to do that. So is there going to be new music? I really doubt it. Would I go
It's
see
not
them?
necessary. They don't
Would I
need new music.
would I go see them now on their own? Yes, I would. Absolutely. So yeah, my opinion changed. I think every band situation is slightly different.
Yeah.
I think that it makes a big difference, and this is where a lot of people get hung up. If everybody that's in the so-called classic lineup of a band is still alive, I think that has a lot to do with it. It's different if somebody dies, but at the same time, again, when with modern pop music just getting more and more moronic and AI driven and everything, and I'm not going to get on a soapbox about this, people like stuff that's real, like, and people of all ages. Like my son is in his early 20s and he was with me at that show, and he was enjoying it and he liked the songs. I mean, people were just into it, right? So, I think it's, why not? I mean, Brian's as good as an original member as you're going to get. Jerry's not going to do it at this point. Jerry's enjoying his retirement, and Jerry's pushing 90 at this point. He's not going to do it. He's not going to do a tour. Gary Moffat is just totally out of the music business altogether. There aren't a lot of guys that could put together a version of April Wine that was quote unquote legit to some people's eyes. I think they're doing just fine as they are.
I don't think people appreciate Gary Moffat, for example. For him to pick up his instrument and get his chops back into touring shape would take months and months and months.
Yeah.
Like, these guys are not professional musicians anymore. But I did want to riff off of a few things that you said, because it is different from band to band when they don't have original members yet. I had some conflicts with the Quiet Riot Camp when they reunited with Mark Huff, but it wasn't the fact that they were doing it with no original members. It was that they were misrepresenting the band as having started on Metal Health. That was my bone to pick.
Yeah.
So yeah, for the record,
that's just simply false. And,
Right.
and you're right for, hey, you're right for saying
Right.
something.
Like Robert Lawson, I'm a bit of a music historian, and they were trying to sell it as two different bands. And I'm like, okay, two different bands, but they had the same singer, the same bassist, and they used the same logo on albums. So anyway, neither here nor there. What you said in the epilogue, though, and I probably knew this, but you said that Miles did ask the band to keep going when he was too sick with diabetes, I believe it was.
Yeah, Miles suffered with, he was a lifelong diabetic. And I can't imagine, there are certain, ailments that people just live with.
Yeah.
And to be on the road, I would think would be really hard to manage when your sleep schedule is disrupted and you're eating, road food, and, everything is, up is down, down is up. Your work day starts when most people are going to bed. So he did struggle with it, and it eventually got him, I think, is what finally took him. And he had actually been working on replacing himself on the road and still being involved with the band, much like
Foreigner.
much like Foreigner, much like Kansas is doing now. And I thought it was weird, but at the time it was unprecedented.
Yeah.
So yes, Mark Parent, who's their singer and one of the guitar players now, he was handpicked. I mean, he was okayed. So there really is no, that's the legacy, right? That's who, Gene Simmons, people can say what they want about Gene. Nobody can tell us when it's time to stop except us. Nobody can. No, it's like, I don't care what you think. Or more likely, and I think a lot of us are like this, you should do this. Well, just because you said so, I'm not going to. No, I don't want it. So, I mean, I think a lot of people, if they think, oh, when are they just going to stop? I just don't think they like the band to begin with.
Right.
That's kind of what I think.
Or liked them enough to continue to follow them.
But then again, some fans of bands don't seem like they actually like the band they claim to be a fan of. So
Well, some
sometimes
fans,
we eat our own.
Sometimes we do outgrow the band, and that can sometimes make us bitter that the band didn't grow with us as we hoped. And I will bring up last week's band, Motley Crue. But that's a whole other show. One other thing I wanted to mention about your epilogue. Very glad that you did write that.
You know what? I was writing that in my head as I was watching them on stage. I knew as soon as I got home, I had to bring that right up to date.
I wanted to mention the fact that you did, on the TVC YouTube channel, you did get some really nice video footage that you posted, and I highly encourage fans to, well, I'm sure you're already subscribed to TVC, but definitely check out Tim's video footage from that day. Really, really good stuff. And if I may make an observation, I felt like Miles' spirit was in the air.
Oh yeah,
they talked about him a lot.
Yeah.
I just felt like he was there. It really, even just watching it on my screen, I kind of felt like he was there.
I mean, so much of, most of those songs they did were his songs. His creations. And, he's just one of the great, because Miles is one of those guys, he wasn't a virtuoso at any one thing. He was just really good at a lot of different things. And those are the guys that don't always get the props that they should. Because he was a great songwriter. He was a great guitar player. He was a great singer. He was a good producer. He was self-taught on the piano. And when you listen to some of the songs he wrote on piano, they're beautiful. Like a Lover, Like a Song, and like I Wouldn't Want to Lose Your Love. He taught himself to play the piano. And then he, not only that, but he wrote some great songs with that self-taught knowledge. So it's pretty incredible when you really start looking into it. But there's a legacy of songs there that needs, there's different ways of keeping it alive. The band are keeping it alive out there on the road. And, in my small way, because there'd never been a book, to my knowledge, like this on April Wine. I want people to check this band out that had either vaguely heard about them, maybe heard one or two songs, maybe even had a few albums, but just didn't realize the depth that there is to this band. They never wrote music that was going to reinvent the wheel. They just did it. They just wrote really great melodic rock.
I'm going to throw it back to D'Arcy as we come into the last 10 minutes of the show.
Sure. Yeah. My last question would be for someone that's maybe never heard April Wine, and that is, they can pick one album to start with.
That was my question, D'Arcy.
Oh no! Which album would you recommend? Because I think there's a difference between our favorite album. Because I was thinking of that. I can think of my favorite album. I don't think it would be the one I would recommend to someone.
I'm assuming that you mean a studio album, not a comp.
A studio album. Yeah.
Okay.
Put it down, Mike. Because that's one of the things that did it for me, was that All the Rockers compilation. Yeah, you know what? I'm going to say Stand Back. I think Stand Back is a great record. Is it my favorite? No, ultimately my favorite is probably Harder, Faster, or maybe even Attitude. But Stand Back has a little bit more variety, because Stand Back has some heavy rockers on it. It's got What a Night. It's got Victim for Your Love. It's got Highway Hard Run, but it's also got great pop on it, like Tonight is a Wonderful Time to Fall in Love. It's got I Wouldn't Want to Lose Your Love, a great ballad. It's got a kind of fun, like almost like a Southern rock bluesy shuffle, and Don't Push Me Around. It's got a nice sort of 60s-ish doo-wop, not doo-wop, but like a teen beat ballad called Come Hear the Band. Really good stuff. There's like one throwaway on there, and that's Slowpoke, which is just sort of a novelty song. And I'm not really big on that Baby Done Got Some Soul that Jim Clinch sang, but for the most part, yeah, that's a good solid studio album to listen to.
And I guess since D'Arcy took my question, I'll just tell my story real quick. Tim knows this one, but back in, I guess it would have been 84, my buddy Bob and I, we used to make recordings, little sketches and stories like that. And I've written about this on my blog, but we had a superhero team called Death Team, and it was kind of like heavy metal G.I. Joe. But one day, Bob and I decided that we were going to record an audio adventure. Remember, you could buy those records.
Oh yeah,
adventure? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So we decided to do it, and we had music in the background. And for one episode, it was Caught in the Crossfire by April Wine. And it was so perfect because, like, it's this spacey science fiction-y kind of thing. We're being chased by aliens in our little story, and we have these laser beams, but then we would have really corny dialogue between Bob and myself, like, we're caught in the crossfire, boys. But that was my entry point, was Caught in the Crossfire. And Bob's like, honestly, the laser gimmick, it worked. It worked. He's like, you got to hear this song. So again, it's all in the eye of the beholder. It's all in the personal experience, because I was, in 84, I was 12. Of course, laser beams were going to get me in 12. But having said that, I do love this album. And today, my favorite April Wine song is the opener, All Over Town. I think it's fantastic. And why I like it is because I'm hearing the song kind of, for the first time in my life, and it brings me right back to that era. It sounds like 1984. And it's like, man, it's like reliving my childhood and getting to discover songs from that era. And they're having that impression on me, just like I was 12 again. And that's a special experience. So I'm glad to have kind of gotten into April Wine later in life. And quite honestly, thank you, Mr. Durling, because I believe of all my April Wine here, you bought me most of these. You bought me this one, I think.
Well, I had to get you a Japanese import. And that's another thing. Why wouldn't a Japanese import have that B-side on it?
Right?
Obviously, they don't have access to it, or they would.
You definitely sent me this one.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that one.
You sent me that one.
Yeah.
I think this one I bought on my own.
I think
on your
you did,
recommendation, but you sent me this one, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, that one and Animal Grace at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you, Tim, so much. D'Arcy, you have a fantastic YouTube channel. Everybody should go and subscribe to D'Arcy Scott if you have not. Do you have anything fun coming up that you can divulge to the audience tonight?
Do I? My next guest on my channel will be the one and only Jex Russell. I will be continuing the Big Shiny Deep Dive with Big Shiny Tunes 2. I know you wanted to lay claim to that one, Mike.
That's okay.
He came in, so I'll see you for episode 3.
Okay.
And then I do have some other kind of ongoing projects about, bands like April Wine. A lot of Canadian bands, Canadian sounds as well. So that's kind of my next big project.
Awesome. And I know, Tim,
my favorite episodes that D'Arcy does are when I want to see what he's bought. I like watching those ones.
I like those. And What's Good is a good series.
Yeah. Probably stand to watch. We can watch Jax, right?
I love that.
He might take his shirt off, so we'll see.
Well, yeah, that's the problem with Jax, is you never know when he's just gonna.
He has a tendency. Yeah, he's like he's in the NBA. He's ready to go at a moment's notice.
And speaking of shirts, don't forget that you can go to tpublic.com. There's a whole ton more of newer TVC designs.
Adding stuff. There's a whole gallery of based on this. So
so don't hesitate to check out the TeePublic. Tim, I know you've got tons of stuff coming up on Saturday. Is it Saturday the 15th? Yeah,
it's
tomorrow.
As we're recording this, yes. My buddy Matt and my son Jack and I are going to Halifax to see Deep Purple in Kansas, and there's going to be an episode documenting it. I am so excited.
I was actually referring to something else that you have coming up, which is
okay. So the episode that's going to play, that's already pre-recorded, yes, is the episode that you and I did with Robert Lawson on Angine de Poitrine. Yow. Right. But yes, in real time, Deep Purple in Kansas.
That's going to be awesome. And you've got an April Wine deep dive series on your YouTube channel.
Yeah, this weekend it's going to be Monday, and it's actually going to be on The Nature of the Beast. So working my way through the catalog. And if there's one regret I had about doing this book, I just wish they'd done more music in the 2000s. I just wish there was a few more albums to talk about, but there isn't.
And if I may reveal a spoiler, you and I have already recorded an episode on this album with, again, Robert Lawson.
That's right. Yep. Yeah, that's going to be a couple more weeks. Yeah.
Yep. But it's coming.
Yeah.
All right, folks. So in order to wrap up, go to Amazon.ca or .com or wherever you are in the world and look up Mr. Durling. I guarantee you this will be one of the first hits that you get, and order your copy of On Record, the April Wine album review. It's a good one. Trust me. If you can't tell from the passion from our panel tonight, then I don't know what you've been watching. Thing number 2, go to D'Arcy Scott and subscribe. Thing number 3, go to TeePublic. Check out Tim's Vinyl Confessions. Check out myself. We have a store for Grab a Stack of Rock as well, featuring artwork by Harrison Kopp. So that is all, folks. Wish Tim a great concert tomorrow with And we shall see you next week on Grab a Stack of Rock with our special guest and book contributor, Mr. Dan Chartrand, and the return of Mr. Ashley Geisler. So we will see you next week on Grab a Stack of Rock, same rock time, same rock channel. See ya. Peace. Fun love.
Friday night, we're rocking the races. Come and see familiar faces. Uncle Meat, Rob Daniels, Jon Snow. Gibby's here, it's the place to go. Grab a stack of rock with Mike and the Bad Metal Man. Grab a stack of rock and hold on tight as hard as you can. T-Bone's here, it's time for a party. Come and see, got the comment started. Grab a stack of rock with Mike and the Bad Metal Man. Grab a stack of rock and hold on tight as hard as you can. Grab a stack of rock. Grab a stack of rock with Mike and the Bad Metal Man. Grab a stack